Hey Adventures, today is once more a book review. This is for Stormfront by Jim Butcher. Of course, this is the first book in the Dresden Files. It's a fantasy book, an urban fantasy, low fantasy, kind of. I feel like I've heard things that as the series progresses it becomes less low fantasy and more high fantasy, which I'm not entirely sure how all that works. But anyways, I will just get right into my what I have written. This one I have a fair amount of stuff written for it because I had a fair amount of thoughts as I was reading it. So this story follows a wizard detective as he tries to unravel several cases, and when I started it, I wasn't particularly invested or caring if I read it at that time. Mostly I just needed another audiobook that wasn't terribly long. There's another booktuber I was actually asking on a Discord server what another audiobook could be that I could listen to, because I needed one in between the two audiobooks the one that I just finished and the next one that I was going to start that I wasn't quite ready to start yet mentally. So I asked for a audiobook recommendation, and Patrick Ryan, who's a booktuber, and a couple others suggested that I try Stormfront, and since it was available at that moment from my library, I decided to go with it. I was like, okay, well, this seems like a good one. It's not terribly long, and it's available right now. I might as well do that one. So I listened to it. Overall, once I got into the book, I quite enjoyed it. The world was really interesting, and the character of Harry Dresden was really solid as well. His motivations, his fears, his desires, etc. So the characters and the world building were by far my favorite aspects. I have more to say on that as we continue going, but there was a fair amount of unfortunate adult content, as I refer to it. Basically stuff that I don't feel needed to be there to tell the story. It's unfortunate that it was there. It didn't make me enjoy the book anymore, and if anything, it made me enjoy the book a little bit less. But that's the way it is with all of them, and I expect it. I don't have to like it. But overall, the biggest issue I had with the book was the writing. While not horribly written, it wasn't great. There were some aspects that weren't an issue, but I noticed it most specifically in the character descriptions. Each time he'd meet a new character or he'd describe a character, he basically, this is the author, Jim Butcher, would follow the same pattern. He'd give their eye color, he'd give their hair color, their body shape, the clothes that they wore, and it really frustrated me in that way, because it was, you meet a new person, you're like, okay, this is what's going to happen. They're going to describe this, 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 and this, and this, and still not know what they look like. Because even with all the precise details, I was unable to formulate any sort of image in my mind of what they were supposed to look like. Once I noticed that I didn't like it, I started looking for descriptions in other books that worked, and to no surprise, I found them in Lord of the Rings. Shouldn't really surprise you, because Lord of the Rings is my favorite. But in Lord of the Rings, they are described by the emotions that the characters feel when meeting them. Sure, in Lord of the Rings, they're described by the emotions characters feel when meeting them. They do give some description of the character's clothing, but it's used to show how the complete image of the new character being introduced affected the character that was seeing them and describing them in their words, essentially. So we met a character, and I would instantly have they do a brief description in like 2 lines, 2 sentences, and it would be like, boom, there's all the description that you're going to get of the character, at least for this moment, but you know exactly what they look like. You have a complete mental image in your mind because of the emotions that they invoke when seeing them. Just a little bit of a comparison between the two writers. Obviously, Tolkien is a very different writer than Butcher, and that's fine. They don't have to be exactly the same, but one of them I really liked a whole lot more than the other one, and a lot of it had to do with the descriptions that were given. I also got frustrated with the way that the characters were being described. Not just that Butcher used the same formula for each character, but also the adjectives and the parts that were just being described. It's like, why do you have to describe this? And part of it was because it is Harry Dresden and it's being described from his perspective, and so I get that, but it still just kind of frustrated me, and I didn't see a need for it. So besides some unfortunate content and not the greatest writing, I enjoyed myself quite a bit. I thought the world was fascinating and the interactions with magical beings unique, fun, and different. At the moment, this series is not one that I'm really, really excited to continue with, that is like, I have to continue with the series, the first book was so good or anything like that. It's more of a, if the next book comes up that it's a good time for me to listen to it or read it or whatever, yeah, I'll read it, but it's not one that I've ever been terribly much like, oh, I've got to read this series right now, it's so good. anything like that. Most likely I will continue with the series though. So that's really my thoughts on Stormfront by Jim Butcher. I liked the story, okay, it was fine. The writing was okay, but the world building really intrigued me. I really liked the way that the world was set up and the different characters and monsters and stuff that we get to meet throughout the first book. I really enjoyed that. Harry's character and really all the other characters that we met, I thought were well done characters. They were fleshed out and developed, and you could get a sense of who the character was just from the first book. And I mean, I don't know how many of the characters continue on to later books. I don't know how many new characters we'll be meeting or anything like that, but from this first book, the main characters that we met, specifically Harry, I felt like I got to know who this character was, and so I appreciated that as well. That is my review for Stormfront by Jim Butcher. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday. We have our social medias linked in the description down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. We will see you guys again soon. Thanks for watching. Stay warm.